Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Debate. Today, we're going to be looking at one of the most significant events in the U.S., which is the swearing-in of President Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States. We're going to discuss what's going to happen in the future for the U.S. in the next 4 years, how the leader is going to handle the COVID pandemic, how the economy is going to work during the 4 years of his presidency. And we're going to get into a lot of details about the future of American politics. And we're going to start off by a report about President Joe Biden and what is possibly going to come in the next 4 years. At the official inauguration ceremony, Joe Biden was sworn in as the 46th President of the United States at the U.S. Capitol today. Kamala Harris was also elected as the U.S. Vice President, the first woman to become Vice President. Among those attending the ceremony were former Presidents Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton. Outgoing Vice President Mike Pence was also present after skipping a departure ceremony for Donald Trump at nearby Joint Base Andrews earlier in the day. Hours earlier, Donald Trump left Washington before Biden's swearing in, the first American president to skip the inauguration of his successor in more than 150 years, saying it had been an incredible 4 years and promising to be back in some form. Trump did not address Biden by his name in his remarks, but said he wishes the new administration great luck and great success. A White House spokesman said Trump, in keeping with tradition, had left a letter for Biden in the Oval Office. The 74-year-old Trump has hinted at running for president again in 2024, but faces a trial in the Senate over the role in January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol by his supporters and a potential ban on holding office in the future. Trump boarded Air Force One after his remarks, and the presidential jet took off the 2-hour flight to Florida as Frank Sinatra's My Way played on the tarmac on a sunny but chilly day. The inauguration comes exactly 2 weeks after Trump supporters stormed the Capitol in a bid to disrupt the certification by Congress of Biden's November election victory. Trump repeatedly and falsely claimed that he won the November 3rd election, and he was impeached for a second time by the House of Representatives after his supporters stormed the Capitol in a bid to disrupt the certification of Congress to Biden's victory. Biden, 78, will become the oldest U.S. president in history at a scaled-back ceremony in Washington that has been largely stripped of its usual pomp and circumstances due both to the coronavirus as well as security concerns following the assault on the U.S. Capitol by Trump supporters. And to tell us a bit more and shed more light on the 46th President's path, we're joined over the phone by Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The U.S. President Joe Biden, as he's being sworn in, obviously there's a big and heavy burden set upon the president because of a lot of different factors, the economy, whether it's unemployment or the COVID pandemic, as well as foreign policy problems. Some have even said that it may take years for the U.S. to recover from the Trump administration's economic fiasco, for instance, as well as obviously the pandemic that has affected a lot of countries' economies, in addition to the foreign policy changes that Trump has created and rifts between different countries. How can you see this happening, and what do you see Biden doing in the next 4 years? Will he be able to somehow correct some of the problems that former President Trump created during his term?
I think that we shall witness a lot of change starting from now.
Yes.
And we have seen early this morning that the new president has declared some positions against some decisions taken by the the last president.
Yes.
Especially the relations between the United States and its neighbors and the different tribes in the United States itself. And it was quite clear during the ceremony that all the members of the American community were presented, whether those of African origin, Latin America, or European origin. This means that the Americans should seek unity, and the new president promised to be the president of all the Americans, even the 75 million who elected President Trump or gave their vote to him. Trump was not that bad, but the problem that he was so untrained gentleman. He was unpredictable in all the time.
Yes.
He doesn't choose his words. I think that he was not depending on his consultants to take positions. So he was a sort of reacting on day-by-day basis. And he declared a trade war against his dearest and closest partners.
Exactly, sir.
China,
Which brings me to the
largest,
not just China, sir. I mean,
partner of the United States.
Yeah,
Against
Mr. Ambassador.
Europe, and he imposed tariffs on the European exports to America against Japan. So this is not good for the health of the American economy itself.
Yes.
So I think that we expect that the new president would come to all these decisions and put it in order again.
Mr. Ambassador, which brings me to the next idea. Like you were saying, there were some rifts between traditional allies to America, including neighbors. I mean, Canada and Mexico had a large rift with the U.S. Under the Trump presidency because of policies by the Trump administration itself. Do you see the relations between these two countries and their neighbor, the U.S., warming back up again under the Biden administration?
It seems that this is one of the first decisions taken by the new president, the relation between the United States and Mexico and Canada. I visited Mexico twice in my life, and between those two visits, almost 20 years. And I have seen how Mexico was developed because of the NAFTA agreement, the North America Free Trade Area.
Yes.
Instead of sending illegal migrants to the United States, they started to build their country and establish industries and export their products to the United States, and this reflects itself on the Mexican economy.
Yes.
Trump came and he started to build a wall. This reminds us with the Israeli wall against Palestinians to separate the United States from its immediate neighbor. And he stopped the agreement. He withdrew from the agreement of the North America Free Trade Area. This is amazing, really. Now the new president, he canceled this decision, and I think he will put this in order again. Same thing I would expect concerning what happened with Europe, the most immediate alliance to the United States, and to China and to Japan. All of them are complaining about the Trump decisions against any region. Now we hope that this will come to order again, and this will reflect on our economy, of course, because United States, we cannot hide that it is one of our largest and most important partner in economy and trade and development assistance also. So we need a rational presidency which we can talk with. Although our relation with President Trump was not that bad, but it was unexpected move here or there. Jerusalem is a very bad example about what he did. We hope that this will come to reason again.
Sir, do you think that the Biden administration will, I mean, obviously they will try to reunite Americans again, but the United States right now there's a lot of tension and there's a lot of different opinions and a large rift between different factions of people. Do you think that Biden will be able to unite people again and instead of having them divided?
Let us hope so, because after all, the United States is based on several organizations. We talk here about the Foreign Office, about the Defense Ministry, the Pentagon, then the Presidency and the Parliament. Mm-hmm. As of the two ministries, Foreign Affairs and the Defense Ministry, they have the files and they can give serious advices to any president to come. Maybe the Presidency and the Congress are under the pressure of the voters. And here you have the pressure groups like the Jewish community or else who can maintain pressuring on the administration or on the Congress to change the policies. But after all, the deep bureaucracy, as President Trump said, the deep bureaucracy is good. I am proud that we have a deep bureaucracy in Egypt which can maintain giving good advices to any administration, and this is what I hope, this is what we can expect from the American bureaucracy in the good sense of the word bureaucracy.
But sir, you know that the tensions in America have been building up for a number of years, and what happened on Capitol Hill was unprecedented basically for the U.S. and the fact that now they're saying that there's domestic terrorism because of these different rifts and right-wing extremists and so forth. Is this a problem that's solvable within the next 4 years, or is this something that's going to be ongoing and the healing process is going to take more than one term of presidency?
That was a sort of a very bad dream. Everybody is regretting what happened, and the only solution for this is to bring law and order severely again, and to stop any sort of movement against the legal organization in the country. And if you do not treat such movements in a very strict way by the law and by order, then we are nowhere. But I think the Americans are well determined to face this threat. And thank God we have seen a beautiful performance today that everything was in order. And I think the Americans got the lesson that they gain a lot if they come back to the law and order in their country.
What about Middle East policy? Do you think that there's going to be a change in the Middle East policy with this new administration?
The minimum, I expect that we shall not see worse than what happened up till now from the Trump administration. I mean, he made Israel do not respect or honor its own signature on the Oslo agreement with the Palestinians.
Yes.
He withdrew the recognition of the Palestinian PLO, and he became totally biased to the Israelis more than the Israelis themselves. And some wise Jewish community people are advising Israel that this is not good for their health. What Israel can do with the Golan Heights or the western part of Palestine with 6 million Palestinians, and in 20 years to come, the Arabs will be more than the Jews. Then what? Also, if I look forward 10 or 20 years from now, this is not good for the Israeli future to establish unfriendly borders with all its neighbors. This is not good, and we as Egyptians, we have the ability to tell the Israelis about that Israel is not doing well for its own security for the future. So any administration to come, I think they will be aware of what I'm saying, and we shall not see this sort of exaggeration about being royal more than the king.
Well, sir, thank you so much for joining us over the phone to give us your insight on what's going to happen in the next 4 years. Ambassador Gamal Bayoumi, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and get back to this episode. Welcome back. We're joined over the phone by Ambassador Wafat Bassem, the member of a UN Committee on Human Rights. Good evening to you, Mrs. Ambassador. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good evening.
Can you?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly fine.
Okay.
Can you tell us what do you think of what's going to happen in the next 4 years when it comes to the new administration and how they're going to handle domestic policy in the next 4 years?
I think the first concern of the new democratic administration in the United States is actually the internal affairs of the country.
Yes.
As it's very clear and as all they have reached the conclusion, as it was reflected in the speech of inauguration today of the new president, Joe Biden,
yes.
It's very clear that there is a concern about the internal affairs of the country. Let's say there is that feeling that there is the split in the country. Let's not forget that there has been 80 million Americans who have voted for Mr. Biden. We have also more than 75 million that have voted for Mr. Trump, which means that there is a deep gap between the American people, inside the American people. It's not an issue, like Mr. Biden said today, it's not an issue of which candidate. It's the general mood, the general feeling that the State of the Union or the unity of the country is very much at stake.
Yes.
And I think that kind of speech will continue, and we'll hear it again when the president is going to make his speech on the State of the Union later on. The other thing is that we will find that Mr. Biden has spoken about the importance of finding ways to combat COVID-19.
Yes.
He has mentioned that the U.S. has lost 400,000 victims to this pandemic. And now I think most of the resources of the country will be going to provide vaccines and to continue researching for remedies to the pandemic. If you have noticed today, because of the pandemic, but also because of certain of the strong security measures that were taken today, for the first time, we do not see the element of popular participation in the inauguration of the new American president. That's why he today stressed that the inauguration today is not the victory of the one candidate versus the other, but it is the victory of the concept of the democracy.
Yes.
Especially what has happened after what has happened less than 10 days ago
in the capital.
In the Capitol Hill.
Yes.
He spoke also about the white discrimination.
Madam Ambassador, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but which brings me to the idea of the theme of the inauguration today. It was America United. This phrase is amazing and beautiful, but the fact is that there is a significant rift between Americans from the left to the right. Like you were saying, there's supremacists, white supremacists, and systemic racism, which is an issue that the leftists have, been protesting about for the last year. And then there's the right wings, such as the Boogaloos, the QAnon, and all of that. Is this something that they can fix in just 4 years, or is this something that needs to?
No. Yeah. The nature, the classical, traditional nature of the political life in the state has changed. First, those who are conservative, like the Democrats or the liberals, by definition, have become more, I would say, between quotes, more revolutionary than the old generation. The new generation of liberals is much more liberal than what we are used to. And it is the same if you apply to the Republicans or to the other side. These new generations are more active, are more, I wouldn't say violent, but more vocal. They want drastic changes, and they don't want to live in this era of, of compromise and sort of passing on the authority without really leaving a stamp, without really making a difference.
Yes.
This is what they want. And for this, maybe the president here, Joe Biden, has promised to reverse many of the very strong resolutions and decisions that were taken by his predecessor, like, for instance, to ban the continuation of making the wall with Mexico.
Yes.
He wants also to improve the economic situation that was very good before COVID-19. So he has two challenges: to go back to what it was before COVID-19 under President Trump, where Americans were seeing a flourishing economic situation, less, more work for the Americans. He wants to go back to this, and then he will be having the challenge to even upgrade this economic situation with all the challenges he has internally. Externally, of course, he wants to resume or to regain the role, the American role on the international arena. He wants, and most of the challenges, or the biggest challenges for him, will be Iran.
Yes. Will he go back to the Obama policies when it comes to Iran?
Maybe not particularly the Obama policy, but definitely he wants to keep Iran at arm's length. So it will mean he will use an approach different than the one used by President Trump. That's definite. We can see an opening in the channels between the EU and the US. And that will be a useful thing as far as the Iranian agreement is concerned.
Yes.
There will be a resumption of, let's say, negotiations or talks on new terms, new conditions for Iran, because the whole situation has evolved a lot since 2015. We are not at that time when the agreement was made. There is a lot of changes, security in the Gulf, the opening, the resumption of some Arab countries in the Gulf of relations with Israel. There is the deterioration as far as the security situation in the region itself. There is all the rumors or all the news about Iran continuing to enrich uranium against the agreement. All these developments would need sort of renewal of the terms of the conditions that existed before.
Okay, what about?
And we don't know. Yeah. We don't know if Iran will accept that easily.
Mm-hmm. What about when it comes to Israeli-American relations? Obviously, they have always been traditional partners, but Trump made some moves like moving the embassy to Tel Aviv. Do you think that Joe Biden might backtrack a bit from the policies?
No. I don't think there would be a reversal of certain steps that were taken boldly by President Trump. Definitely not. I mean, there is no reverse, for instance, for the encouragement of more regional players in the Middle East for their relations with Israel in the country. These agreements will be consolidated, and the U.S. will continue helping very much that these relations are smooth and going well on the way. There is no return because anyway, it was a decision moving the embassy to Jerusalem, the American embassy, is a decision that has been taken long before President Trump. The only thing he made is that he sort of entered into the phase of implementation, of physical implementation on the ground. There is no return as far, let's say, as their policy concerning the colony. Maybe not with so much noise as was made under the Republican or under Mr. Trump in particular, but this will not be reversed again.
What about the climate change agreements that the Trump administration backed out of? Do you think that Joe Biden is going to reignite it?
It's a good symbolic gesture, very much so, of the return of the U.S. To the international arena. It makes the French happy, as we have seen the first reactions of Mr. Macron. But don't forget that the convention or the treaty on climate change is not in any way, there is no obligation for implementation. It's a voluntary kind of implementation that you can or that you make or do not make. And it puts very much the responsibility on the big industrial countries. They might volunteer, they might self-restrain, they might take internal decisions and policies to meet and to avoid the bad impact of climate change, but they are not obliged to do that.
Yes.
There is no mechanism of control and monitoring. There is no set of sanctions. And because of many, many problems, even the big protagonists of this agreement, like France, like Germany, have not really made any forward steps in this area. But it's good. It gives a certain hope that, the U.S. is back on track at the level of the international concerns and challenges of the whole world. It's different than the WHO. The return of the U.S. to the World Health Organization, as signed today as a decree by President Biden, has a much better significance. It will return a certain confidence to the organization. It will ensure the continuation of the payment of the arrears and the membership of the USA which is a big contribution to the organization. It will help the cooperation in the field of research as far as combating diseases, whether they are transmissible or non-transmissible.
Okay, unfortunately, ma'am, I'm going to have to cut you off there. So, Ambassador Wafat Bassem, a member of the UN Committee of Human Rights, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. And we're going to take a look at a report about who Joe Biden is, and we're going to take a look at his life and how he became the 46th president of the USA. Let's take a look.
Joseph Robinette Biden swear that I will faithfully execute.
A lifelong dream for Joe Biden comes true on Wednesday with his inauguration as the 46th President of the United States of America. Third time proved the charm for Biden, though there were some bumps along the way. Unlike previous attempts in 1987 and 2008, he entered the 2020 race for the Democratic nomination as the de facto frontrunner, the best known in the field. The 77-year-old suffered early setbacks in the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primary, but seized control of the contest with a string of successes on Super Tuesday when 14 states vote on the nomination. Biden's lower-key election campaign style contrasted with former President Donald Trump's larger rallies as the Democrat portrayed himself as more responsible on observing coronavirus measures. Passionate about and committed to asserting and defending America's role as a leader on the global stage, Biden was that country's vice president and deputy to President Barack Obama. His 2 terms supporting the first black president followed a long political career. Even before it had become a mainstream issue, Biden was one of the first to call for action to address climate change and protect the environment. Healthcare remains a top priority for Biden as the coronavirus crisis unfolded. He formulated recommendations rooted in advice from healthcare and economic experts. Those suggestions include making coronavirus tests broadly accessible and free. On the economic front, boosting the middle class is one of the main pillars of his campaign. He often says that the country needs to build an economy that rewards work, not just wealth. As part of his foreign policy, Biden has promised to reform the visa system and work towards eliminating the country quota system for green cards. The Biden campaign has emphasized it will increase the number of visas offered for permanent work-based immigration linked to macroeconomic conditions and exempt from any cap on recent graduates of PhD programs. Biden, who has been in public life for around half a century, is banking on his experience, seeking to cast himself as a steady hand to drive America to greater heights, though he would be the oldest president in the history of the United States.
Welcome back. We're joined over the phone by Ambassador Hussein Hariri, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, madam.
The Biden administration plans to unveil a sweeping immigration bill that provides an 8-year path to citizenship, which will affect the lives of 11 million people living in the U.S. How do you see this policy, and what do you see the Biden administration doing in the coming period when it comes to immigration policies, since Trump was very, very tough on immigration and wanted to build a wall, close down citizenship paths and so forth?
Well, according to the latest news reports and according to statements by some officials within the Biden transition team in the last few days before the swearing-in ceremony of President Biden today, according to the statements and according to the press reports, President Biden is slated to sign 17 executive orders in the next 24 hours.
Yes.
Among them, one that concerns a path to citizenship for illegal immigrants living in the United States.
Yes.
Also, to rescind the decree by former President Trump that separated children from illegal immigrants, parents, illegal immigrants. Thirdly, that he would rescind also the ban on some Muslim countries that was adopted by former President Trump in the early days of his presidency back in 2017. So I guess President Biden, as we have witnessed in his inaugural speech, wants to emphasize diversity. In the meantime, calling for unity within the United States. So, of course, that message, with the decision or with the decisions related to visas and to providing a pathway to illegal immigrants in the United States, and the regrouping of illegal immigrants' parents with their children. All this, of course, comes under the heading of unifying the Americans around a liberal agenda. So I think that decision concerning the providing citizenship for 11 million illegal immigrants would positively impact the Latinos, the American Latinos within the United States. And as a matter of fact, President Biden is the first American president to nominate some Latinos to higher positions in his administration. So we are of course witnessing a changing of the guards in Washington, in the United States, between a very conservative administration that was led by former President Donald Trump and a more liberal president who is bent on healing the United States after 4 tumultuous years.
Mr. Ambassador, the Biden administration is going to face a tough 4 years, as you were saying right now, because there's a lot of different burdens. Other than the divide and the rift between the American people, they're combating the COVID pandemic, and America's the hardest hit country in the world by the COVID pandemic. In addition to the Trump administration leaving with 3 million jobs less, economic hardships, and difficult political rifts between people, in addition to the idea of it's the insurrection in the Capitol Hill and all of that. Do you think that the challenges that face President Biden in the next 4 years will be easy to overcome for him, or at least will he be able to overcome maybe 50% of what he's up against in the next 4 years?
Well, it's difficult to say. But what I can say is that President Biden and his administration had the will to work with Republicans, to work across the aisle, as the saying goes, in the U.S. Congress, in order to enact various bills that would address some of the questions that you have raised. A few days ago, President Biden unveiled a very ambitious stimulus plan worth $1.9 trillion to deal with the COVID-19 COVID-19, with the unemployment, to deal with to deal with evictions and foreclosures, and to provide checks, the stimulus checks worth $2,000 for millions of Americans. So I guess President Biden has entered the White House with a plan, with a bold vision to move the United States forward amidst the challenges that you have just enumerated, ma'am. Of course, it's too early to say whether he would succeed, and in 1% he would succeed. But I guess hopes are high in the United States, not only in the United States, but around the world, that his administration would move forward. Maybe it won't be able to achieve 100% of its vision, but at least they have the will to work with Republicans and to work with with their allies and partners abroad for the sake of stability, progress, and security.
Okay, Mr. Ambassador, unfortunately we're out of time. So Ambassador Hussein Hariri, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Debate. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this episode of the Daily Debate, but stay tuned for more information and for more updates on Nile TV.